Hi, my name is Kelly Teich, and thank you for tuning in to my author discussion on Octavia Butler and her works. So, Octavia Butler was born in 1947 in Pasadena. She quickly learned how difficult life can be. She lost her father at a young age, and she had to start working early on to help support herself and her mother. She picked up a lot of tough jobs throughout her childhood, and she had to balance that with a developing passion for writing. She worked hard to balance that, but it soon paid off as she defied many of the stereotypes and the odds of her time to become more successful than even some white male writers. Even her dyslexia could not slow her down. It was a challenge, but she was able to work through it and became one of the most successful writers of her time. So, Pattern Master is Butler's first major novel. It was published in 1976, and it really inspired her passion for science fiction, and it established her as a science fiction writer. The plot of the novel centers on telepathy and the furthering of technology, and it follows the Pattern Master's son who is trying to keep his long lost brother from obtaining the pattern which connects everyone's brains and all their thoughts. Um, in a time where science fiction was not very prominent and just now developing, just becoming popular, Butler really shocks readers with these detailed descriptions of telepathy and technology that were really unheard of before the publication of the book. And it was so successful that Butler went on to complete a 5-part series called the Patternist series, and this book actually became the last book in the series. She wrote kind of in reverse. She wrote the first 4 books afterwards, but they are arguably some of her best works. So, Kindred is another one of Octavia Butler's most famous books. It focuses much more on racial issues like slavery and prejudice than on like science fiction and futuristic topics. But the novel follows the life of Dana, who is transported through time. She time travels to meet her ancestors in the 19th century antebellum South, and she gets to witness firsthand what slavery was like. And she finds out that her ancestors are actually an African American slave woman and a white slave owner. So, through combining her messages of the inequalities of slavery with a little bit of that science fiction and the time travel, Butler is able to present a real issue and a real societal message alongside the science fiction aspect that she loves, which allows her to enthrall the reader while conveying her message at the same time. So her ability to do this is really amazing, and it's one of the reasons she became such a successful writer. So Parable of the Sower is most likely Butler's best known work. It's one of her best examples of how well she does that combination of science fiction with presenting a societal issue and the underlying meanings of that. So the most prominent issues discussed in Parable of the Sower are freedom of religion and freedom of speech, which can also be considered representative of all human freedoms in general, natural freedoms that we should have. So Parable of the Sower chronicles the journey of Lauren, who's a young girl. She's trying to find her place in the world, in a futuristic world actually, where a lot of people are trying to get her to believe one thing or another, her parents, society, and she doesn't really feel like she fits in, so she's trying to find her place in the world. So many of the lessons that she learns throughout the book are very relatable to college students right now, trying to find our place in the world, trying to find out who we are. So very relatable, a great read. It's flawlessly written, intriguing, and perfectly shows how strong of a writer Octavia Butler is. So some other works by Butler. The first one is Xenogenesis. So pretty well-known work turned into a trilogy. Part of the Xenogenesis trilogy focuses on genetically altered children, which is very futuristic, very out there. Definitely fits into the science fiction aspect. She puts a lot of emphasis on aliens, abduction, and war, apocalyptic war. She also introduces a third gender that belongs only to the aliens, so that is also a very relatable issue to now, talking about gender equality, sexuality. And then Fledgling, another great work by her, is a vampire novel, so that's kind of iffy, but it doesn't fit in with most vampire novels. She does a great job of making sure it's not stereotypical like a romance novel or anything like that. It has a twist that prevents it from falling into that category. So Some big issues in this one that are discussed are race and sexuality. Those are big, very relevant also, again, for college students. Definitely a big conversation at the moment. And then Bloodchild and Other Stories is a collection of some of Butler's best short stories. She wrote a lot of short stories before publishing that first novel, and then more novels after that, but she was very good at short stories. So that's just a compilation of some of her best ones, and those span all kinds of different aspects of science fiction. She does a great job of creating these other worlds, so it really sums up her writing style very well in those. So, of course, Octavia Butler is a great writer, so of course she has to win some awards. So her first award she won in 1984 for a short story called Speech Sounds, and that was a Hugo Award for Best Short Story. And then the following year, Bloodchild, which is one of her main short stories in that other collection I talked about, won 2 awards. It won the Hugo for Best Novelette and the Nebula in the same year, so that's amazing. In 1995, she actually won a grant from the MacArthur Foundation for the genre of fiction. And in 2000, she won a Nebula Award for Best Novel for Parable of the Talents, which is almost like a sequel to Parable of this Hour. So Butler sadly passed away in February of 2006, but her legacy, of course, continues to live on through her works. They're persuasive, they're raw, expose some major flaws of modern society, while also bringing in that technological aspect that so many readers enjoy and really hooks the reader. Shows how technology can change the world through her science fiction writing skills. She truly was a pioneer of the genre, not only for women, but for all kinds of authors in science fiction who found an interest in it. So Gregory Hampton is an author of a biography on Butler, and he's quoted as saying she revealed universal truths, so things that others recognize but are too afraid to call out. She was brave enough to call those out in her writings, and that's what I really admire about her. She's amazing. She was brave like that. And her openness and her drive to change society are very inspiring. Her legacy will always live on through her writings, and that's amazing. So next up, I just have a quote here that I really enjoyed from Butler that I found while doing some research, and it says, "I wanted to write a novel that would make others feel the history, the pain and fear that Black people have had to live through in order to endure." And I just really like that she speaks her mind. She's kind of explaining her writings through Parable of this Hour and why she wrote it and her motivations, and you can really see that not only through her writing but also in this quote. And I just really like being able to see how the author blatantly feels instead of having to decode it through some of their writings. So I just really enjoyed that quote. So I'd like to sincerely thank you for tuning into my discussion of Octavia Butler. I really enjoyed getting to research her. She's an amazing woman. She's very inspiring. And now that I've seen some of the other works that she's done and read some summaries on those, I'm really excited to look farther into them, maybe read some of her other books, because she is an amazing writer and her legacy is fantastic. Thank you so much for watching.